Welcome to lesson number 3 of module 1 of the Healing Brain Masterclass, Overcoming Common Concerns. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, John Malanka of The Sacred Plant. Today we're going to explore common concerns and dispel myths that have clouded patient and doctor judgment in deciding whether to even consider the sacred plant as a medical option. Questions like, does cannabis kill brain cells? Does it lead to addiction? Unfortunately, we as a society have been plagued with misinformation. Many people are still heavily impacted by the stigma and negative propaganda surrounding medical cannabis. Some of you here have even agreed with these ideas before finding the sacred plant. The first step in gaining safe and legal access to medical cannabis is to rid our community and beyond of the false information and slandering. Let's join as Dr. Stein breaks down what the research says about the most common concerns, such as, is cannabis addictive or is it a gateway to hard street drugs? Let's dive in. So Dr. Stein, this topic comes up all the time. I'm certain it comes up with you with your patients coming in here and talking about the concern a lot of patients have. Is cannabis addicting? Is this going to be a gateway to hard drugs in the future? And can you share about that on your studies and research which is out there? Because there is research on this. A lot of patients come back to us and say, my doctor said there's no research. So I know we'll talk about this in our upcoming lessons. But if you could just talk about the concerns.
Yes, well, those two concerns about addiction and gateway come up all the time. The other common one is, do I have to smoke it? Yeah. So oftentimes when patients first come to the clinic, I actually answer those questions or address those concerns before they ask, just to kind of relax them and let them know. In my introduction, I will say, this is very safe. There's no risk of addiction. And you will not get addicted to the point where you need to use other drugs. And there's lots of ways to use the medication without smoking. Truth be told, there is a form of addiction that is possible in cannabis, usually in young people who use cannabis in large amounts every day. It's called cannabis use disorder. And individuals who have cannabis use disorder have primarily a psychological addiction. They depend on it. And their social activities are affected by it. Mm-hmm. So they spend most of their day thinking about it. When am I going to get it? How do I get it? Other types of social activities suffer because of cannabis use. And that's a form of addiction, mainly psychological. As far as the gateway concern, we now know that without a shadow of a doubt, cannabis is not a gateway drug. It is actually an exit drug. And we have seen several studies, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the globe, where patients that use cannabis actually can remove themselves from using other harder drugs like opiates, heroin even. And in those states where cannabis has been legalized for medical use, the number of new opioid users based on pharmaceutical numbers is actually down.
Okay. So
no, it's not a gateway. No, it's not addictive for most patients, and it's quite safe, actually.
I appreciate that from a neurological point of view. And can you talk about the benefits, or are there any interactions between conventional medicine as well as while using cannabis? Can you use these in conjunction with each other?
There are interactions.
Okay.
I mentioned opiates before. Patients that are using opioid analgesics like hydrocodone and oxycodone and fentanyl and other strong analgesic therapies from opioid class, when they start taking cannabis, the effect of the opioids is potentiated. So a small amount of cannabis can make the opioid therapy seem more intense. And that's fine, because then those individuals don't need to take as many pills. They use a little cannabis, they get a better effect of their opioids, and that's part of the process we use to take them off their opioids. So there's a medication interaction right there.
Which they should do under a physician's care as well. I've mentioned numerous times in our Q&As, Crit and I have spoken at neuropathy groups, cancer neuropathy, diabetic neuropathy on a regular basis. And a lot of these neuropathy patients are taking 4 to 6 oxycodones a day and not feeling anything. They try 2 milligrams of cannabis and they are stoned and climbing the wall. And they say, you know what, I'll never try cannabis again. And it's not a cannabis issue. It's the interaction with the drug-to-drug issue. And so can you talk about the benefits as also the side effects of drug-to-drug interaction, why a medical professional should be involved?
So there are interactions that are helpful, and there are some that are harmful. So we have to be careful. And yes, having a doctor to help those patients that are on other medications, include cannabis in their therapy, can be a very important partnership. For example, Coumadin, which is a blood thinner that a lot of patients use, has to be monitored on a regular basis to make sure that it doesn't cause too much of an effect. Cannabis in high dose can affect the levels of Coumadin. So that's another interaction that there's a risk attached. So we have to be careful.
Mm-hmm. And that it's not a one size fits all, because a lot of patients think, oh, I know it's happening for Susie. It's working well with Susie. It's going to work well with me. But Susie might have something completely different than I'm experiencing, or even have the same thing that I'm experiencing, and it can be a completely different reaction or interaction with the medications and how it works with me. So a medical professional, I can't say this enough, how important a medical professional is needed when using cannabis with other medications, or even using cannabis for what you're going through and any ailment that you're going through right now. So Dr. Stein, before we move on, this topic comes up, and it must come up with your patients all the time. I want the medical part of the cannabis plant, not the recreational part. Medical meaning CBD, recreational being THC, and this is another stigma that this industry is plagued with. A lot of patients are afraid of that. Like you mentioned, I don't want to smoke it. What can I do? But in regards to THC, CBD, are there any studies showing brain damage, ruining memory, and anywhere from adolescence to an adult brain?
THC is a very important part of the medication we recommend. And so it's important to emphasize to patients that it's not a bad molecule. THC is very helpful for treating a number of different conditions. It's also responsible for that feeling of high that people get. So THC has gotten a bad rap as being a bad molecule, a bad medicine, and people that don't want to get high don't want to take the THC. The truth of it is, if you use THC like any other medication in a proper dose, you won't get high.
Okay.
You can enjoy the other medical benefits of THC, the analgesic effects, the anti-pain effects, analgesic effects. It can help you sometimes function during the day. It can reduce muscle spasm. There's lots of positive benefits that THC has, as long as we use it in the proper amount.
Yeah.
Now, with kids that use too much THC, there can be a risk. There are some studies that show that high-dose THC use in adolescents can slow cognitive development. There's risks of THC in patients with schizophrenia, or in those patients at risk for developing schizophrenia. Too much THC can push them over the edge, so to speak, and make the schizophrenia worse. And that's what's called a psychotic reaction. So there's risks. But like any other medication, we minimize those risks by proper dosing. One of the things we talked about earlier, the entourage effect, is very important in this respect. CBD, along with THC, helps dampen down the effects of THC and reduces the chance of those psychoactive side effects. Some people want to feel euphoric, but most patients that come into our clinic for medical reasons, Parkinson's disease and so forth,
they don't need it.
They don't need it. They don't want it. They're concerned about it. And so I teach them proper dose, proper combination of cannabinoids reduces the risk of those types of things happening.
Gotcha. Now, recently there was a study talking about cannabis boosting memory instead of ruining memory. Did you hear about this, read about it?
Well,
agree with it, disagree with it?
I think memory is such a complicated topic. It's hard to make one comment encompassing it all. There's short-term memory, there's long-term memory, there's memories for faces, words, places. It's a complicated topic that I know will be coming up later in the lessons.
Okay.
Just to summarize, it can go both ways. So if you're using a terpenoid like alpha-pinene, you can have an enhancement of memory function that counteracts the loss of memory that some people see with myrcene-containing cannabis preparations. So again, you want to balance these different terpenoids to reduce the chance of short-term memory loss, which is a risk, by enhancing the other molecules' effect to preserve memory. So it's chemistry, it's cannabinoid cocktails we talked about,
Yep.
and it's reducing risk, and we can do all those things.
So thanks, Dr. Stein, for clarifying these terms and digging deeper into sharing this information with our followers. Like I said, I learn every day. I hope you're learning as well. But thank you again.
Thanks, John.
And on to the next lesson.
Let's go.
It is always good to have those clarifications and making sure we are sharing them far and wide to aid in ridding ourselves of false, unsupported claims about medical cannabis. What other myths and fear tactics have you heard? Make a list and let's discuss them on our upcoming Q&A with Dr. Stein and myself. In lesson number 4, treating cannabis as medicine, we will talk about the importance of treating cannabis as a true medicine and what that means to you as a patient or caring for a patient. We'll also look at ways to check on your results from treatment.